Barron v. Baltimore arose in 1833 at the end of John Marshall's tenure as Chief Justice, and it arose at a time in which the federal government had expanded somewhat under Marshall's authority, and this case raised the question of whether or not the Bill of Rights would apply to the states. So Barron v. Baltimore arose at a time when the Bill of Rights had never been questioned to apply to the states. The city of Baltimore was engaged in a series of public works policies between 1815 and 1821, in which the city was diverting water to create streets and sewers by the Baltimore harbor. John Barron happened to own a wharf on the harbor, and as a result of these projects, sediment accumulated under his wharf, rendering the wharf unusable. And as a result, he sued the city of Baltimore to recover the lost profit of the wharf. The Fifth Amendment provides that the government may not take your property unless it shows that it's for public use and it compensates you justly. Baltimore's response to John Barron's claim is that the Fifth Amendment simply does not apply to the state of Maryland or its local governments. So because it was a federal question, in other words, a case involving the Fifth Amendment, that meant that John Barron could petition the Supreme Court for review, and the Supreme Court granted that review. In a unanimous decision, Chief Justice John Marshall, writing for the court, held that the Fifth Amendment does not apply to the states or to their local governments. Chief Justice Marshall began his opinion by explaining that this was an important issue, but not a very difficult one. He used Article 1, Section 9, which applies to the federal government, and Article 1, Section 10, which applies to the states, to say that the Constitution creates a division between liberties that apply to the federal government and those that apply to the states. Because the First Amendment begins by creating prohibitions against Congress, he reasons that that must mean that the Bill of Rights are tracking that same division between the federal government and the states. I think the significance of Barron v. Baltimore is in appreciating how the original Constitution was designed to operate. The original plan was for there to be a sharp division between the federal government and the states, so that some issues of interstate significance would be subject to the federal government's jurisdiction, but the states would have the authority over their local matters, even when it raised questions of constitutional significance. This division was certainly weakened by the 14th Amendment and the Supreme Court's later interpretation of the 14th Amendment to incorporate most of the provisions in the Bill of Rights to apply to the states. But Barron is still important for signaling the importance of dividing federal and state power.